Hello and welcome everyone back to
Not Fighting.
I'm Tyler Bishop, and this is my wife, the old ball and chain, Jena Bishop.
I feel like I could introduce myself, but you always do it for me.
I feel like one
Typical man.
I feel like one. I was thinking about this today, but I was like, at some point, like one of us will probably be, probably sounds so narcissist. Why can't I say that right now? Oh my God.
Narcissistic.
Like,
Anyways,
I was gonna say one of us is probably gonna be famous one day. Not like we're probably. I mean, obviously, but people will go back and find these podcasts and then be like, "Oh, they're just normal, normal weird."
I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think everybody thinks that they're weird. I remember living with my aunt and uncle when I was in college, and and I remember like my aunt being like, well, you know, like you're going to stay with us. You're going to see just how crazy we are or whatever. And it's like, you know what? They're weird. They're weird people. But everybody's weird, like in their own way.
Yeah. We all have our quirks.
They were weird in like the way I expected them to be weird, you know?
Yeah. That's what I expect. Yeah.
Everybody that has kids to me is a little bit weird in some way.
Why so? Why you say that?
So... It's weird to me because I don't have that experience. People like say that to me sometimes. Like even people that I meet for the first time, they're like, you know how kids are or whatever. I'm like, kinda, you know. Like I guess
from a distance.
Yeah, I think I get it. As
an uncle.
But like, no, I just mean like I think at some point whenever you have kids, like you're just so beaten down by like the process of like having to like manage this crazy thing that's running around all the time that at some point, you know, it's like you've got like a diaper filled with crap like in one hand and then like maybe a beer in the other or whatever, and you look at yourself and you're like, you know what, I know what this looks like, as well. But yeah, that's
just
true.
Saying.
Yeah, I feel like if you have a dog, you carry around poop more than if you have a kid, like in hand.
Yeah, carry it. Yes,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, there's laws here in California. I guess everywhere.
I feel like everywhere.
Where you can't. Yeah.
And just being like a decent human.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it's one of those things too where, you know what, I'm guilty. I'm going to like raise my hand. I'm guilty of the like taking a dog on a walk and being like, oh no, I'm out of poo bags. But I'll make sure that he like goes in like a bush or something like off the beaten path. What drives me crazy is whenever you see what looks to be like a German Shepherd that's taking a huge dump in the middle of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, people. But to like counterpoint, I have done that where I've ran out of poop bags before. I don't know why we're talking about dog poop, but this is where the podcast is headed.
And I've had to like run back home to grab more and then like come back and clean it up. The worst, because it's like I'm not gonna leave it there.
The worst is whenever you realize you're out. And then there's lots of people around, and you're like, what do? You know, like you're either that person.
Ask somebody else for one.
Yeah. Or you act like they were just peeing, and then you're like, oh, it's just a pee? All right, keep going. And you act like you were busy. And
you say that out loud. It was just a pee.
It was just a pee, everybody.
And that's why you don't understand children.
Yeah. I don't understand them. No. But I also do. I also do, because I am one.
Because you are a child.
I'm a child.
You are a little boy.
Yeah.
Entitled.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking about that earlier today when we were walking the dogs. I was mad because I felt like our inside scoop. I feel like our dog is entitled.
No, he acts very entitled, and he's a very entitled dog. But
like you say, it's just a fact. Moving along.
He is, and you know, I can't say that we have discouraged it.
No,
but I pointed out that was you as a child for sure.
You're like, were you entitled as a child? And I was like, no, I deserved everything that I got for free.
Much like that's another point about you were telling me about your run earlier this week, and I was like, you can tell the story first, and then I'll say what I thought about it.
So I go for this long run sometimes, and there's this path, and it goes, I mean, I don't need to go into detail, but it goes underneath a bridge, and there's like basically like a concrete sort of like ravine, kind of like sewage area where it's like, it's, I don't know, maybe a foot and a half worth of water, and it's like a concrete slant down. Anyways, I'm on my run, and there's a kid and he's riding by me on his bike, and I recognize it, and you know this, and loyal listeners know I'm terrible at guessing a child's age. He's between the ages of 7 and
14
and 25. Yeah, I mean, realistically, the kid's like, he's
probably 10.
He's at least 9. I'm thinking about families and kids that I've had to teach in jiu-jitsu before. This kid is at least 10 years old.
Yes. Okay.
So kid's 10 years old. He's on his bike and he's just weaving. He's like all over the trail as he's passing me, but he's like right next to me. So it's kind of annoying because he's riding his bike and it's like forcing me to be aware of him. Mm-hmm. Anyways, it makes me sound terrible at this point. But
yeah, like,
the kid's watching. The reason why is the kid's watching a YouTube video on his phone. It's like got a like a thing that allows him to like kind of put his phone like up on his bicycle, and his little brother's like following him. His little brother's weaving too, because I think he thinks that's how you're supposed to ride a bike or something. This is what I assume. And so I'm like running. I'm like, I thought he maybe had that on there because he was like looking at a map, and I'm like, oh, like he's got good parents. This is a smart kid, you know. He's like looking at Google Maps to figure out how he's gonna get home. No, just like watching some YouTube video on there, not paying attention to his brother. Not a good kid. Okay, so you're gonna like this next part. So we're going underneath this bridge, and he's slightly in front of me now, and I watch him start to get really close to where it like just is a hard incline down into the water, and this this child, he just starts going down this thing, and I'm like, oh no, like he's just gonna go into the water, and he does. He just like goes into the water, and the water like slows him, and it's just like shh, you know, and the kid's like sitting in what I assume is like raw sewage at this point, and his little brother's like sitting above him, just like looking at him like, but am I supposed to follow you?
Are we gonna play in this?
And the kid, he's just like, he just got this face of just like, why'd this happen? Like as if he was just like riding his bike along and it rained on him or something. It's like, it's not happenstance. You were watching some video on your phone.
You're not paying attention, and you rode your bike into this like little like poo stream.
So you know what I did, but what would you have expected me to do in that scenario?
Nothing, because you wouldn't. You would have been like, you dumb kid, you deserve that. And then, which is what he did.
Is what I did.
That's what he did. And immediately I was like, but you realize that is exactly who you are, and that's what you were as a child.
Yeah, so what did I say to you about it?
Yes. 100%. And that's why you didn't help, because you said you needed somebody to like make you learn that lesson the hard way.
I learned most of my lessons the hard way, and I've learned a lot of lessons in life where adults stood by and let me make mistakes, and then when I was done, they were like, see? Yeah. And then I was like, I'm going to show you. I'm going to do something better next time. And now you're going to not be like, see, I'm going to be like, see.
And that is why you wound up in jail.
But one of our thumbnails, I think, says like,
yes, yes, that's the only reason I said that. But
yeah,
no.
I've never been to jail. Make that really, really clear. I mean, not yet.
No,
fingers crossed. As of the recording of this podcast.
Yeah.
Although I did get pulled over this week too. I feel like we haven't talked about jiu-jitsu or combat sports. We're gonna, if you're listening to this and you're like, where's the jiu-jitsu stuff? I'm like, I mean, at this point, if you're still listening to this show, then you know what you're in for. It's your fault. But yeah, you know the story. I guess before I even tell people, like, what's your take on it? I guess.
I mean, I don't know why you want me to give a take before you explain it.
I just feel like I'm talking a lot.
I know you are. No, you got pulled over, and it's like, yeah, that is. Well, actually, it makes me mad because I feel like every time you've gotten pulled over, like, there's been scenarios in your life where you've gotten like, I feel like harassed by police because you grew up in a small town and like they had nothing else to do but pull over all the teenagers that were driving through town, and you have like a ton of stories about like police harassing you then.
Yeah, we had to have routes to like basically not get back to our houses, not through town, because the cops would basically just pull you over.
Yeah, for being young.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like every time I've gotten pulled over, I've gotten a ticket. Like I never get out of that stuff. Like I feel like everybody talks about that. We're like, oh yeah, they were nice. They let me go, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, if I was speeding and I got caught, like I'm getting a ticket. But
I mean, I got 2 tickets 15 minutes apart once, so I don't know where you're going with this.
Yeah, but that was like when you were a dumb teenager.
Yeah, I was dumb.
But as an adult, you've gotten like lucky, and especially here in California, you've gotten pulled over 2 times. And,
3 now.
Yeah, 3 times now, and like you got a warning and like a little citation because your address wasn't up to date on your license.
No fine, just like go get your address updated.
Yeah, nothing crazy at all. And so I'm just like, how do you get away with that stuff? I don't know.
I just,
And then this time, he just pulled you over for rolling through a stop sign.
I didn't roll through a stop sign. I didn't come to a complete stop.
Yeah, well,
and he pulled me over.
The only reason he told me the story is because he was doing the same thing like hours later.
As I was doing it again,
dude, I was explaining to
him, I was like, hey, I got pulled over earlier for doing this exact thing. It just reminded me. No, but the cop pulled me over and he was like, hey, we're just out here in the neighborhood. I'm not going to give you a ticket. He tells me that right up front.
Which is nice because then you can relax a little bit.
Yeah, and I imagine many of our minority listeners here are like, oh, good, that's what they normally happens to us too. They tell us immediately they're not going to give us a ticket and not to be worried. But yeah, I think that the thing that happened that I found fascinating was he told me that, and then he's like, we're just out here in the neighborhood. And we're just trying to make sure that everything is safe and everybody's following the rules. And so I wanted to stretch my legs a little bit, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, so, just tell your friends you got pulled over. I was like, all right. Well, I guess it worked because I told the podcast, most of which
he got pulled over.
Lives here in Carmel Valley.
San Diego. But yeah, the police.
I almost gave out our address on the podcast.
The police are out here. They're patrolling for our safety, I guess.
Yeah, don't give out our address in the podcast for sure, right?
Yeah, why would you?
Yeah, otherwise we're going to get like...
No, just stop.
Weird mail. I'll leave it at that. But yeah.
That's the least of my worries from that.
No, but we were kind of talking about it a little bit just because we were talking about like when you have to sit idly by and let someone make mistakes. And, sometimes as a training partner in jiu-jitsu, I feel like when you're an upper belt, you kind of have to, you see somebody making the same mistake, especially if you tell them like, hey man, like when you're in half guard here, you don't give up the head here, don't give up the underhook or whatever it is. You get to this point to where it's like, well, after they keep making the same mistake, you're like, all right, well,
you're just going to learn by getting crushed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see how you're going to have to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's how you learn most you as a person.
Yeah, everybody learns different ways.
I would say me too. We both like to learn the hard way.
Yeah. Well, we like to see.
I want to know, like, are you for real or not?
Yeah, we're different in that like
I'm more of a rule follower. So if somebody tells me this is the rule, I'm going to follow that rule. I don't need
you want to optimize. You're like, I want to make sure this is right and I want to do the right
fast
thing.
track to like
I want to innovate. I want to blaze a trail. I'm like, maybe no one's done this before. Let me see if I can't just,
figure out a different way.
Do a triangle from bottom out. No. That's some white belt ideology.
Yeah, that is for sure.
But one of the things we were talking about before that was like what makes a good training partner. And this week I unfortunately I hurt you in training.
Well, yeah, kinda.
Got real. No, you were already hurt.
I like tweaked and injured an injury training with you, and it was to no fault of yours. But then after that, I was like, there was like 10 seconds left in a round, and I'm just like, I can't do what I need to do because of my injured toe.
Yeah,
sounds dumb, but turf toe is a real problem.
And I'm like, hey, let me just push her up against the wall.
Let me just put her on the wall because this is what she needs. This is what she wants. And like make her defend takedowns when she can't balance on one foot. So he took me down, but then like crammed my head into the wall. Just like wrecked my neck after he had already like, I hurt my toe taking you down.
Yeah. So a lot of us are at fault in that scenario. And I feel like
one of us more so than the other, but
but I do think that that's something that comes up a lot, like when you talk about like is somebody a good training partner or not. Like there are all these people that like somehow magically everybody that rolls with them has like a higher injury rate than the people that don't.
Oh yeah, there's certain people that are just hard on you as a person because they have like, I feel like the people that are like that are kind of like always hurting you, because there's a guy that we train with that like anytime somebody like gets hit in the face, basically hit in the face, okay?
Usually with something that's like a knee or
like
a heel.
a knee, yeah, like some kind of like kick or something like that. We're like, oh, were you training? Were you training with so and so? And then they're like, yeah, and I'm like, yeah, I understand, because
we all know.
Like flying stuff, always just flying, throwing their body like without
it's your problem now,
without concern, like at you, and you know you're gonna get hit. You're gonna get hit in the face. You're gonna get your tooth knocked out. You're gonna get all these things happen to you from time to time, and those people don't really have care or concern for their training partners as much as they care or want to win.
But it's an obliviousness.
Yeah, it's not intentional. It's not intentional at all.
And that's the thing where it's like that lesson has to be learned by that person the hard way. I feel like,
yes.
Where it's like,
but I don't think those kind of people who are oblivious to that ever learn.
Well, I mean,
their
if
own
you get
lesson.
the black belt, it's kind of like seeing an adult that's like making mistakes that you should make as a kid, but they're still making it as an adult. You're like, well, they've decided they're going to make that mistake at this point, or they're just going to live and die by it.
Yeah, this is just who I am, and I can't change it. That's who that person is.
Yep. And I think that whenever you look at training partners that are doing it consistently and it's early on, like there's still a chance. And sometimes you can kind of like, I think that this is common in some gyms where you like try to beat that out of somebody. If somebody's like real ballistic or spazzes are kind of like the traditional, like what you expect. And I feel like, some gyms, the idea is like you beat that out of somebody.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes that works, but
sometimes it does.
But it's also like taking a dog that's like mean and being like, you know what I'm gonna do?
I'm gonna beat you to make you better.
Yeah, I'm
they're gonna be worse.
Be mean. I'm gonna ramp it up, and it's like I think that sometimes that methodology is like makes the problem worse.
Yeah, I think so, 100%. But it's very hard to like. That's the thing is like it's very hard to teach somebody or explain it to somebody when they're so oblivious to what they're doing is hurting people, like hurting their training partners and that kind of thing. Because I feel like there's always certain things that I'm teaching in class, and when I teach it, I'll say, for instance, when I'm teaching like a knee on neck choke, which is like, one of my favorite things to do, I always tell people like, yes, like this, people complain about it, like, oh, it's such a dirty choke, but I'm like, no, like if you do it properly, I can place my knee in your neck. It's no different than like a head and arm choke or certain things like that because of the pressure. But, and so in training, I'm always very polite about how I do that. In competition, I don't care, like, because they're not my training partners. So I don't care. I just want to win at all costs. And so if I do put a knee...
At all costs in this case is your neck.
If there's a knee in the jaw, that's on you. Don't tuck your jaw. Lift your head.
You decided that your jaw was
fault.
The first line of defense.
Yes, and that is on you. And so if you decide that in class when we're training, I'll be polite and kind of wiggle my knee in there. So you can't. So it's
the wiggles for you,
yes,
by the way.
Yes, just wiggle it in, and then.
Yep. Well, guess what? Your nickname is now Wiggles.
Stop. But like.
Stop! Don't. I don't want people to call me Wiggles.
No. But I feel like I don't even know where I was going with that story anymore. But you'll explain like there's a time to be like kind of mean about stuff because like I like mean techniques and like dirty stuff. Like I do, I enjoy that. But I don't like doing it to the people that I'm training with and I love. Like unless you're like an aura. So if Jenna does something that's like mean or dirty to you, it's like. It's a indictment on your character. I don't love you. No.
You probably do love them.
Actually, I probably do. But I know they can handle it.
Or they need to learn to.
I feel like, I feel like I'm going to like retrack and like be different. I'm nicer to the people that I think can't handle my honesty and my truth. and my meanness.
My truth.
Yeah, my truth. It is my truth.
Yeah,
or the truth. I'm always speaking the truth.
So I'm curious from your perspective if like, I mean, you've taught a lot of kids, you've taught a lot of women, you've taught more jiu-jitsu than I have. Do you feel like those people that like are kind of that spaz that even at like blue belt and purple belt are still like hurting people because they're like exploding at like weird times and stuff like that? Like, is that fixable? Can you like get somebody to be a better training partner?
I think it's a case-by-case thing. I think sometimes, yes, you can teach people to be better, like training partners, because I think people will learn when they get hurt by somebody else, that when it wasn't their fault. Like somebody else being a spaz to them and they get hurt, I think that kind of like teaches you, like, oh, like, you know, if you just hurt all your training partners, then who are you going to have to train with? You don't have anybody. You need those people, so you don't want to just be like a complete spaz all the time. But the people that are oblivious are the worst offenders, and those people, I don't know that they ever learn.
Yeah.
Like, we have another guy that, like, just always wants to grab your neck and crank your neck. Like, from out of position
I know exactly
and whatever. And I'm like, I always come away, like, getting, like, my neck hurt. And it's like, sometimes I'm just like, I have to just like it's better for me, and I think that's like how you grow as like a person too in your training. It's like when they wrap your neck up and it's like, this is not a submission, I can fight out of this, but like if I fight out of it, I know that I'm gonna like have like a messed up neck. And if you train in combat sports, and especially in jiu-jitsu and grappling,
your neck's probably fine anyways.
Not great. Your neck is not great. It's just that's just how it is. It's not going to be great. So that's one of the things that like that getting hurt irritates me more than anything if my neck gets jacked up. That's why I was so mad at you this week.
I do think there is a lesson there, though, for everybody. And that's, you know, like that person that hurts your neck that is always cranking out. And it's like, look, you can not let them grab your neck.
Yes.
You know, and if you go into it and that's what you understand.
You have to adapt as like a person, like to their style. Like you know what they're going to do.
What effective martial art are you doing if you can't stop somebody from hurting your neck? You know what I mean?
That's true. That's true.
But I think what is frustrating is sometimes whenever you're just like, I just want to roll around and have fun right now. I'm not trying to
when you are protecting yourself and they're just like, you're a woman and they're a man that is bigger than you.
It's true too.
And like they just like muscle over your like stuff. Because I'm not talking about somebody who is not like just like a novice in the sport. It's like somebody who's been grappling for a long time. You know, that's when like strength and size matters. Again, is when you have like equal like, you know, skill levels in a lot of ways, or like experience. And so there's certain times where I'm like, I thought I was safe, and then they do something stupid and like just hurt your neck for whatever reason, because it's like a desperation like move or something. I don't know.
And I think a lot of times,
and that's annoying. But
so one thing
it
you
is
said,
kind of on me.
One thing you said that I think is interesting is like, you know, it's a case by case basis. And the thing is like you have to realize like a good training partner for one person might not be a good training partner for somebody else.
Yeah, it's true.
And there's certain people that can be a great training partner for everybody, you know?
Yeah.
Philippe is a really good example of somebody that can train, like, I mean, he's obviously one of the best in the world, but at the same time, like, he can roll with anybody and make it fun. Yeah. And, like, he knows how to not put pressure.
I always tell you, like, how many times I've told you, I'm like, he's, like, way bigger than me and bigger than most of the guys.
Felipe Andrew, by the way.
Yeah, Felipe Andrew. Like, he's one of the guys that's in training that is, like, I mean, he's big. He's super athletic and explosive and just really talented. But I can train with him and have a more like productive and fun, like flowy technical role than I can with most of the other guys in the class. And he's the biggest and the strongest of all of them and the most talented. No offense to anyone else, but just facts is facts.
Yeah. And there's actually another person that we've both trained with before. And I think I'll give it away to you when I say this and no one else. It's that it's not it's no fault of their own. They're not a spaz necessarily or anything, but it's like their body is really hard.
Yes, I just knew that that's what you were
like,
going to say.
It's like somehow like every part of their body is sharp.
It's like you run into them and you're just like, ow.
Bony people are kind of that way sometimes. This guy is not bony.
No, it's just like his muscle is very hard.
And
like,
so there's like, and he's very rigid in many ways. And so it's just one of those things where it's like, I feel
like we're hurting each other the whole time.
Yeah.
And not from submissions, like, just by like touching.
It's like, what's that bruise from? My lat, you know? But yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's like you have people like that, and then you have people like Philippe, and you know, even the person that cranks the neck, it's like that person, like they're a good training partner for somebody that like is coming in. They're like, I just want a really hard roll, and like they don't really care if their neck gets cranked or something in it. They're almost like, yeah, that means I was like training hard today or something, you know?
Yes.
And so they may not have like the widest range of who they're a good training partner for, but I do think that, you know, you can train pretty much everybody to be a good training partner for somebody.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people, and we've talked about that I've trained you well. Like, to be a good training partner for most people except for me, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. But yeah,
I kid. Even though I get mad at you, I know that you're a good training partner, and most of the time when I'm mad, it's because it's my problem, not yours.
Yeah, it's on you.
It's on me.
We agree it's your fault, and I don't need to change.
Except for don't try and roll a certain way.
Yeah.
Just roll.
I try. Sometimes trying to not do that is
the worst thing you can do. Trying
do you
to
guys
not try.
see? Do you
trying
see
not to try or
you
trying
see
too hard. Like
the eye of the needle that I'm trying to thread here?
You're doing too much. Do less.
But
do more.
You mentioned something else a second ago, and speaking of doing more, is the strength thing. And I think, friend of the podcast and often guest, Nick Schrock, they call him Moose. He's obviously...
we call him Moose.
Yeah, we call him Moose. He's stupid strong. And, you know, for a long time, I know people would always just be like, well, I mean, he is strong. And he can do things that, like, no one else can do. I watched him pick a dude up to pass his guard this week. Dude was, like, way bigger than him. He just, like, picked him up and got past. And I can imagine somebody being like, oh, how'd you do that pass? And him being just like, oh, you just lift the guy up, you know, and move him. Once he's airborne, they tend to freak out a little bit.
Yeah,
and
the same guy who just like curled my whole body weight like off of his back to get me off.
And so like, but I feel like people a lot of times use that as like almost like an insult, like, oh, you're so strong. You know,
yeah, that's one thing is like I like when people tell you when you get done training, because I feel like I get that a lot from guys, like, oh, you're really strong, and I'm just like, well, thanks, I guess, but also. When we're talking about, like, there's certain scenarios where if somebody tells me I feel like a dude, like strong like a dude, that's a compliment to me. But if somebody's just like, oh, you're really strong, I'm like, do you think I'm not technical? Like,
I think what happens
a lot... It's like, you think I'm using strength over technique?
What I think is the funniest, though, is whenever it's a guy that's like 20 to 30 pounds heavier than you, and they're like, wow, Jenna's really strong. It's like, yeah, I know what you mean. She is. She's a freak. She's a freak of freak athletes. But at the same time, like, you're 30 pounds heavier, and like realize that she feels so strong because she's behind you. You know, like that's part of it.
Because my position is good.
And that's what I think.
That's the thing is like, I think people don't understand is like, there's certain things that you feel strong because you have great position. And then there's certain things where you're strong because you're just using muscle.
Yeah.
Like it's just a strength thing. And I think people don't understand the difference sometimes.
Yeah, it's funny. Nick was actually in training with me on Tuesday or Thursday, and we're learning technique from our professor, Professor Johnny Faria, and he was showing something like, man, Johnny's pressure from here is really, really good. And him and I were trying to he came over and showed us, and we both felt it, and we were like, yeah, we were both doing it to each other. We're like, yeah, the pressure is just not quite right. Yeah. And every single time we would both like kind of squeeze harder.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he had said that just rang true to me was like, he's like, you know, rarely do you use your muscle to like create more pressure. He's like, the pressure that he had, it felt like he could be relaxed and create that same pressure. Meanwhile, if you're like squeezing as hard as you can,
that almost makes it easier for people to escape positions. Like if you're squeezing them harder,
the pressure usually just doesn't come from, like you having lots of muscle. I mean, it can, but it usually accentuates it. Like that guy that choked somebody unconscious just from their shoulder pressure or something. It's like he probably, whether he's squeezing or not, has great shoulder pressure.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like Johnny's a great example of that. Like somebody where it's like, his positioning is so good where he feels like a boulder, like immovable. Like, it's just like, how are you? Because it's like, he's not a small guy, but he's not like the biggest person either. And for sure, he's strong, but it's like, you don't feel like he's using strength, and it's very hard to move him. He feels his position is so strong.
Yeah.
And his technique is so good that it's just like, and I think that's where I think people kind of get things confused sometimes with you just being strong. And I think people get that confused in trying certain techniques too, where it's like, I need to be stronger here. And it's like, no, like, that's the great thing about jiu-jitsu is like, it's not necessarily about you being stronger. It's having like a certain like positioning and like your technique being good that makes you stronger in certain positions.
And I think for some people,
like
it's
smothering.
It's a crutch to believe that somebody is just stronger.
Oh
or something,
yeah, of course.
But I also think
people love to make excuses for like for their shortcomings.
For sure, and I think that one of the things that can happen with this that's a like a trap to fall into is like if you're not just like making excuses for yourself, but you're like, man, that person just felt really strong, like. They're probably just stronger than me. That's like what's happening in this role or whatever. It would be better to think to yourself, like, what is it about their positions? Number one, because there's a good chance that whatever position they're in, you've allowed that.
Yeah, 100%.
Like with Johnny, for example, it's like we talk about this like when we both roll with him or whatever, but it's like if you allow him to come forward, if you allow him to get to this spot as opposed to that spot,
you're never getting it back. Yeah, you're never getting it back. There's another thing. I was like training with Leticia, and she's so she's just a strong female anyway, and there's a certain position that she will get, and I'm like, I can't let her make that grip on my pant, like, and that's like me, like. I get behind if I allow her to do this because she's really good at this one pass, but it's like her pressure and her positioning is so good that like it's my fault if I'm there because like I've allowed that to happen, and now it's good. I'm gonna have to fight really hard. It's the same thing I tell like my kids class all the time, or actually any class that I'm teaching. It's like when they're like, man, this is so hard, like this is a lot of work to escape the mount, and I'm like, well, yeah, like you allowed somebody to pass your guard and mount you, so you think it's going to be easy to like get back to like when they're in the most dominant position, it's going to be easy for you to recover? No, it's not going to be easy. You're going to have to work really hard. And so it's going to feel like they're using a lot of strength because they're in a very dominant position.
They're using far less than you. And
yeah.
That's how jiu-jitsu works.
That's jiu-jitsu.
And
and so thanks for listening.
Yeah, and special rules apply to certain people. Like Nick and I were training this week. He's got such a strong knee cut, and because he's such a freak, we were like doing positional sparring.
His hips are super powerful.
And we were starting in that position,
mm-hmm.
and him and I both like looked at each other, and he's like, "This isn't fair."
Yeah,
and I was like, "Yeah, it's not because I would never allow you to get in this position."
Yeah.
Now, would I allow most people there? That's fine. Like I'll figure it out. But with him in particular, that's such a losing battle for me that it's like the battle is lost once we get there.
That's what's great about positional sparring is you get to work out those things where it's like, I'm behind. So you either learn through that process of like not allowing somebody to get there, or you learn how to defend that position better for the next time if they do get there. And I think that's like the beauty of sparring out of those positions where it's like I'm in the worst spot ever and I need to get out. Like you got to work your defense from those things.
And that's where
it's going to happen.
That's where you can become a really great training partner to somebody too, is there are a handful of things that I'm really excellent at, and someone, like if somebody's a higher belt, like if somebody's like a blue belt and they're like, how do I stop you from doing this? It's like, I don't know, man. Like just keep coming to class and getting better.
You're going to get better.
Step one. But like if brown belt or something is like, why do you keep getting this, or why does this keep happening? And it's like, well, your reaction to this, you realize they've reached this point where like they don't have the answer anymore.
Yeah.
And you can give them like, okay, so I'm really good at this spot. So the answer to your question is like, you just can't let me get here.
Yeah.
For most people, I bet that works.
But you will have, like, I think that's one thing that's different is like you're going to have, for like somebody who has like a more experience or a higher skill level, you'll be able to say like, you can't let me get to this or have this grip. And you'll be more specific on how you're getting there. Whereas like, I would say to like a lower level is like, you can't let me get to that position. I don't know. Because like this, from here, you're dead. And so it's very more general, but like as you get higher in rank, I think you get more specific because there's like little things that like make a huge difference in winning and losing that battle.
I think it's also one of those things.
Maybe that's backwards, but I don't know.
It's where maybe you, I was just thinking about this, is weird, but like, you know, if a blue belt might ask me a question like that, I want to go back like 8 steps with them and be like, look,
like, where did we start from?
Yes, exactly. It's like, well, the only reason I'm on top half guard is because you let me sweep you, which you shouldn't have, like, you fell victim
sat
to that.
to your guard.
And then as soon as that happened, you know, you let me kind of get into here. Like, I made all these decisions. You allowed this.
Yeah.
With an upper belt, I realized to a certain extent where it's like, you can defend against all it. You can do it, and it can still all go wrong if the guy's better than you, or, you know, just their timing's better, whatever. And so I will address exactly what they said because I just assume, like, you know, all the other caveats and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think the lower the rank or, like, skill level, you have to go back to the very start of the position, how you got there, which might be, like, you know, 15 steps, realistically. That's a lot, but, you know, I'm exaggerating.
And it's fair too. Like, I think sometimes people don't necessarily want to know like what their mistakes are because you're not.
They want to just give you an answer that like is an easy fix.
Yeah, and I think you know what? There's a time for that too. Wherever you're just like, I don't know. There's times whenever I think you should be focusing on getting better, and there's times when I think it's okay to just be like training for the sake of training.
Yeah. Well, something that like I never like answer it properly, but people will always be like, well, how did I do? Or like, what can I do better? You know, when I roll with them. And it's not always when I'm teaching a class. I think it's just like, it happens. But even when I'm teaching a class, they're like, well, what can I do better? And I'm like, sometimes I'll know because like, I'll like let things happen, but like, it's not all the time. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I wasn't even thinking. For me, I'm like, I wasn't even thinking about like what you're doing. I was just doing my thing. And then like seeing how you react. And if you give me something or like if you mess up, then I'll like take advantage of it. But I'm not like thinking, like consciously thinking about it because I'm just moving from one thing to the next. So it's just like, it's such a broad question to answer. Which
it's funny enough. One of the things that like, I hate because it's more of like an indictment of like me maybe not trying my hardest, but like somebody will be like, thanks for taking it easy on me. When I wasn't necessarily, I was just training for fun. I wasn't like trying to be whatever, but at the same time, then they're like, thanks for taking it easy on me. I'm like, oh man, I didn't try hard enough. Like, you know? And I think that's the trap of not necessarily always looking for opportunities to improve is you'll rely on your old tricks. Something that rings very true about that is we watched Derek Lewis knock out Curtis Blades this weekend. And
that's crazy.
He just dropped him with this like uppercut that he threw at, like, it wasn't like he was throwing.
It didn't look like he even threw it hard or like whatever.
It was like very defensive in the way he threw it.
Meh.
And he just knocked Blades out cold, landed a couple punches afterwards. And, you know, I saw a lot of people just say, you know, like Derek got out of that one, you know, relying on his old tricks or whatever. And, you know, I think he probably knows that. I mean, I don't know how much different he's going to be.
I think he was losing that fight up until that point, too.
I think until he lands that punch, he loses that fight.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. But that's sort of been his career. But that's his
thing. That's like he just needs one shot because he's got such, like, power.
Yeah. And I think when you're really great at something, it can be a trap in that way because I don't know that Derek Lewis is going to improve as a mixed martial artist, like exponentially over the next few years or as he continues his career. I could be wrong. I like him. I'm a fan of the guy. But at the same time, I think that it's really dangerous to rely on the thing that makes you like the thing that you might be the best in the world at.
Yeah.
Because even if you are, then the strategy is really clear on how to beat you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's 100%. I think that's what you always want to, like, I don't know. For me, I'm just like, I always want to be improving. For the longest time as a jiu-jitsu player, I was always just a guard person. And for me, like, I feel like in the last couple of years, I just really wanted to be a really good top player, like
and
guard
wrestling.
passer and wrestling. And like, that's like, I enjoy wrestling. So that's like easy for me, but I don't know. I've actually come to feel like I almost feel more comfortable and confident on top in a lot of ways, but it's just always trying to,
Our
our dog
like
is howling
in the background. Yeah.
but yeah, it's just like always trying to improve on my weaknesses. And I think that's what people don't like, because it's not always fun.
Yeah.
And it's just not fun. Like that's why when I say like, oh, I want to be a better wrestler, I'm like, wrestling is fun for me. So like, I don't like, that's not like whatever, but there's certain positions where I'm like, oh, we're doing butterfly guard this week and I have to start there. How am I going to get to another guard from here? That's my goal, because I don't like playing it. And I feel like I'm failing when I'm doing it. I hate the feeling of being like not good at something. So it's hard to force yourself into it. The easy thing to do is to like put yourself in a place where you're comfortable and confident. Yeah. Like, it's very hard to like force yourself into like a position where you'll fail time and time again.
Yeah. Especially whenever you're like maybe really struggling with something, you're making mistakes and it's costing you when you're training, because in your mind you might be thinking, I could just get back to De La Riva right now and I could end this thing. You know? But I think that's where real growth can come from a lot of times, where, you take something like wrestling where, like, let's say you are a great guard player or something like that, but maybe the attributes you have physically and maybe even just your mind in general would make you a great wrestler too. You just don't know how to wrestle, and it's one of those things where it's like, there are people out there where, physically or for whatever reason, like their game, I don't know, like they're never going to be a great wrestler or whatever. So working on it truly is working on, something that is a weakness. But in your case, it's like, it's only weak because technically you don't have
they don't have as much skill, knowledge, I guess.
And that's something,
or experience.
That's something you can improve on. I think that's what it's really important to do is any kind of mixed martial artist.
Well, even in like MMA sparring, there's times where I'm like, there's been times where I've trained with other people that are like, oh, I'm kind of just doing mostly work on the feet for whatever reason, like going to the ground. They have an injury that would like make it harder for them to train. So like stand up, it'd be easier for them. And so they're like, oh yeah, like we're just not going to, I'm like, well, that sucks because it takes away like my strongest skill. But I never have been like, well, I'm not going to train with you. Like, I'm like, no, like, cool. It's an opportunity for me to like improve my striking and improve my stand up, And so I think there are people that would just be like, well, no, we're not going to train then, or we're not going to, whatever, because ego.
Yeah.
Ego is the death of us all, honestly.
So profound, and and I think it's a great way to end the podcast. And I think that one of the things that we've been humbled by over the course of the last, I don't know, almost coming up on 40 episodes here soon, is just how many people have followed along and joined the podcast as a listener or a viewer on YouTube. And so we're really grateful for that. But also at the same time, we'd love it if you could leave a review or just like bookmark us, add us to a playlist. All that kind of stuff is really helpful in just growing the podcast. Share it with your parents if God forbid your parents are no longer with you. Man, it's getting dark.
Why are you why are you going there?
Share it with
just with whomever
just strangers
that you love.
That's my point. Share it with your strangers.
Share with your strangers.
Your strangers.
Your strangers is like, the ones
the strangers around you. Your peers.
Anyway, so yeah, thanks for listening and joining us again on another episode
of Not Fighting.
Bye.